Sure. Hello, everyone at Authenticate. First of all, thank you for providing me an opportunity to share the experience we have had with the WebAuthn deployment so far, and also the learnings we have had along the way. Here's a brief intro about myself to begin with. I am Anand Bahety, and I currently lead the authentication and account security products in terms of design and development at eBay. Current focus of mine is into multi-factor authentication and passwordless charters within eBay identity. In today's talk, we'll go over several FIDO and WebAuthn deployments eBay has, the challenges we've faced in scaling those solutions to millions of customers worldwide, and also the best practices we followed to address some of those challenges to reach the stage where we are today. First of all, it's important to set some context about the scale we are talking about. eBay has around 159 million buyers. It did 20 billion plus GMV in the last quarter. We connect buyers and sellers in more than 190 markets and geographies, and we have been in the business for more than 2 decades. This should give pretty much a good idea about the diversity of the user base we have and also the scale at which any authenticator option has to perform for us to even adapt and consider it as a mechanism to sign in into eBay. Let's take a look at some of the journey of WebAuthn and FIDO at eBay. Our first implementation was the FIDO UAF protocol-based biometric authentication inside the eBay mobile applications. We were among the first to implement the spec and also provide open source libraries for client and server in the same area. We then took push notifications as a technology and combined it with the FIDO UF implementation I just mentioned to provide a simple, secure, and scalable two-step verification to our customers. The spec kept on evolving and web authentication came into picture. We also adopted WebAuthn early and provided platform authenticators as a primary means of authentication to sign in onto eBay. This solution has been deployed globally across all the sites and on supported platforms our users can use it. As a natural progression, we also implemented the support for roaming authenticators to be provided as primary authentication to log into eBay. This also has been applied to all the sites and is available globally for our users to use it. As you can see, WebAuthn deployment we have today is being used by millions of users currently, and we are very pleased to see the results. WebAuthn has not only provided us a way to provide simple and secure authentication mechanisms, reduce some of the churns in the account recovery and forgot your password flows, but also has increased our overall sign-in success rate compared to other authenticator options available on the site. Well, the journey towards this stage was not that easy. We have faced several challenges with our WebAuthn deployment, and let's take a look at some of them. First and foremost, inconsistent experience. We faced a lot of inconsistency between major browsers and major platforms. For example, the content shown to the user, the size of the modal, the buttons, the labels, etc., they all differ. Even the text which is used to address the user as part of the JSON request, as mentioned in the specification, appears differently on macOS and Windows platforms. Consistency is a key for any authentication mechanism to scale and become mainstream. However, these things just make it more difficult. We also saw a lot of browser incompatibilities. Let's take a look at a few of them. Safari on iOS requires special handling apart from the implementation of the spec to propagate user gestures via user-activated events. Otherwise, the WebAuthn implementation just doesn't work. Macs with M1 chips do not support direct attestation as mentioned in the specifications. It's the same code, the same WebAuthn implementation which runs across a lot of other platforms. It's adhering to the spec, but it's just that you suddenly find in production that it's not working on some of the major platforms, and sometimes it's a nightmare debugging what's going on and where the issue is. Another example, The spec suggests to use user verification and user presence in combination to achieve enhanced security for roaming authenticators as well. However, many platforms do not support a combination of both. Most of them support only user presence, while some support user verification. These incompatibilities prevent us from providing a consistent user experience across all the platforms. Let's look at some of the specifications gap, which also prevents from becoming WebAuthn mainstream in our case. First, there is no API to detect user verifying capabilities for roaming authenticators, equivalent to something which is available for the platform authenticator. This prevents us from providing a good user experience on the platforms which do not support the capabilities. Next, there is no API to detect if the user has enabled this particular feature on the client side for a given platform. This prevents us from providing a rich user experience when they come back to the site and we want to highlight or promote web authentication as a means of authentication upfront to the users in a deterministic and consistent way. There is no support for multiple top level domains for the same relying parties in the specification. For example, the same user with the same account has to register on ebay.com and ebay.co.uk, for example, separately to utilize web authentication. This is just pure friction for the users, and this is something which is not a trouble with most of the other authentication options available on the site. This gets interesting. A user has to register for web authentication again and again on several different browsers, or for example, even the native applications and browsers on the same device for the same relying party. For example, if I go on a Safari browser on my iPhone and try to register WebAuthn, I have to do it again if I go on eBay's native application from the App Store. There is no formalized process to share users' registration between these various platforms on the same device for the same relying party. These specification gaps also prevent us from making web authentication mainstream and let users adopt it as their first choice for authentication. While deploying, we faced a lot of challenges as well. During the deployment, there was no single source of truth we could find which can give us the information about browser and vendor compatibilities. This caused us to find out in production suddenly that our implementation, even though it's adhering to the spec, is just not working on certain platforms and creating choppy experiences for our users. Given the nature of the spec and the security it provides, it's almost very difficult or impossible to achieve end-to-end automation. This is affecting our velocity to push changes into production for these products, as we still have to do a lot of manual testing. Key rotation. Security guidelines suggest that any cryptographic solution rotate keys at some point of time. However, the specification has left it to the user's discretion and does not address key rotation. By the way, it's also not trivial to achieve key rotation during or after the authentication process following the specifications we have today. Incognito browsing is on the rise, and sometimes inability to detect, as we saw in the previous slide, where a user has deterministically enrolled into web authentication on a client side for a given platform, user may end up registering for the same relying party again and again. And this can lead to proliferation of the server-sided key records and cause operational concerns if it's not being planned for or not handled efficiently. Account recovery. How do we make sure that the users have a simple and secure equivalent authentication mechanism on their file if they lost their device or they do not have their devices which are enrolled into the primary web authentication? Account recovery seems to be a problem at large, and we still haven't found a good solution for that. Let's look at some of the deployment best practices we followed and some of the things we would suggest are the best practices if someone wants to take WebAuthn to a global scale on their websites and applications as well. We implemented the support for whitelisting for browsers, platforms, user agents, etc. to achieve a phased rollout. This gives us the capability to enable a feature for our users only on the platforms we have thoroughly tested, and prevents us from getting any surprises into the production deployment. Do not expect that even though your implementation is meticulously written against the spec to just work flawlessly out of the box on all the platforms, just based on some of the examples I have shown before. We promoted this feature to the users via various interstitials on sign-in as well as some impressions while they are browsing on the website. But we also gave users the choice whether they would like to see whether they would like to see this information or not. Our initial implementation did not do that, and we had to improvise pretty quickly based on the user feedback we got. We also provide a rich return user experience where if a user is coming back onto a platform where they have enrolled into WebAuthn, and if we are able to detect it with the best of the capabilities we have today, then we would highlight web authentication as a primary means of authentication, but still give user a choice to use any other authentication if they choose to. It's good to know that these suggestions have also been baked into the FIDO UX guidelines published by the FIDO Alliance. We allowed re-registration on the same devices. Why this is important? There are several user actions. For example, they can clean cookies, local storages, or come in from incognito window browsing, etc. Not allowing users to re-register again on the same device can create choppy experiences and prevent them from using web authentication. Let's continue with more of the implementation practices. We implemented a backend support on the server side for expiration of the server-sided registration key records. This, along with the ability to allow the users to re-register, addresses key rotation to some extent. During enrollment of the web authentication, it's best advised to ask the user to also enroll into the next best available authenticator option you have on the site or on your application. This will help users do account recovery in a better way. Account recovery as such is a challenge, and if you fail to do so at the time of registration, doing it later can cause user friction and also cause users to abandon the flows. This is very important. We implemented and also advise everyone to implement the support for revocation or invalidation of the server-sided key records or the public keys being stored against user account. Why this is important? First of all, there can be several actions which can happen on behalf of the user's account. A user's account can be taken over, they change password, the account gets suspended, etc. In these cases, revocation of the key is necessary to make sure that the account is always accessed with the best security possible. Today, for most part, WebAuthn enrollment happens after one of the authenticators like password or other options available on the site are presented to the server as a root of trust. Hence, when the root of trust like a password changes, it's inevitable and important to revoke the records we have on the server which are derived from them. Failure to do so can cause security loopholes, and this area is often overlooked. We advise everyone to start thinking about this from the day they start to scale their WebAuthn implementation or plan to design for it. Let's take a little closer look at some of the nuances between the eBay deployments we had. For roaming authenticators to be presented as primary authentication, we decided to mandate both user verification and user presence to begin with. This does limit us to surface this option on very limited platforms because not a lot of them support both of these, but also gives us a chance to start with a better security posture. We can always relax it only to, for example, user presence if needed, but it's always a good idea to start with a stricter implementation, especially when it comes to authentication. We used virtual authenticators Chrome extension to do limited automation. This has helped us gain some agility in our development cycle, but for most part, we are still struggling to get automation end to end to actually achieve higher velocity in our production deployments. We offered WebAuthn as an alternate authentication first. The idea was to let users learn about it, we get some feedback, and we adapt our products to make sure that we do not disrupt the system and understand how this can be offered as a passwordless solution. I would like to close in with some final thoughts. We started the WebAuthn journey with the idea of going passwordless. However, we are not there yet. As you can see, there are still some challenges which need to be addressed. And we wanted to make sure that we have a consistent experience across the board for our users before we pull the plug. Password, whether we like it or not, is an established ecosystem, and disrupting it in a haste is not good for customers and not good for business. Hence, we are very close to being passwordless, but we haven't been there yet. It's time to start thinking of sign-in, registration, account recovery as a single line towards account access. We should stop thinking about these areas as their products in their own silos. Why? This is because if you think of these as their individual product lines, then we will try to achieve something better in one area, but we won't be able to overcome the shortcomings in the other area. Let's take some examples. WebAuthn and other means have tried to bring a lot of goodness into the sign-in and authentication. Federated Login has tried to bridge the gap using OAuth and OpenID Connect for sign-in and registration. However, account recovery still remains a big challenge. If we do not start thinking about these things as a combined way of a secure account access, a lot of times even the specifications would consider some of the shortcomings in the second drafts or the third drafts. And it is extremely important to start thinking in this direction as per our thought process to provide a consistent and secure passwordless experience across the board to the users. With that said, I would like to thank everyone for listening and would be more than happy to answer any questions you have.
Anand, thanks so much. You're getting a round of applause right now. I don't know if you can hear.
Oh, thank you. I can. Thank you very much. It's just that I cannot see the stage.
I know. Else. So we do have quite a few questions coming into the app. Let me just check. Does anybody have a question they want to ask at the mic at the moment? Okay, we do have a question. Is that Kevin? Yeah. Okay, Kevin Goldman's coming to the mic for a question.
Don, thank you. Excellent presentation, and all the sharing you've done with all your learnings over the years has been very helpful too. Thank you. I'm curious to know how UX fits into your organization as you're rolling out these different journeys.
Sure. So if I understand correctly, your question is how UX fits into all these steps in our journey towards WebAuthn. Is that correct?
No, I'm interested to know your internal teams. How do they integrate with the team makeup and how you approach assembling a team that's tackling these user journeys? So not the end UX in itself, but more internally, how do you structure the process of deploying a new workflow?
Sure. So in terms of authentication, we do not see or look at it as a separate workflow. It's the same workflow which the team does in terms of developing any other authentication solution. This is primarily to make sure that any authentication solution we provide maintains the same level of process and other checks and balance we put in place. So for us, WebAuthn is not like a separate product line altogether. It's just one of the other authentication mechanisms we are providing, and all the team members play an equal role in shipping this out to the door.
Thank you. And just one more nuance to the question. Can you describe the team makeup? Engineers, security folks, researchers?
Sure,
UX?
Definitely. So at eBay, we pretty much have a combined team of UX researchers, the UX. We work closely with our internal security team, as well as we have pen testing teams internally and externally as well. And then we have the developers, the testers, the quality engineers. They all, even though maybe part of separate sister teams, but when it comes to shipping the product, they work all together and everyone is on board before we ship anything live to our customers. And for WebAuthn especially, we did a lot of user research as well, just to make sure we find the right content and not put too much terminology at the consumer level, because it's just very difficult for an end user to understand when you have a wide user base.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we had a couple questions on the same topic, so it might just be kind of a clarifying question, but how many FIDO2 authenticators do you actually allow to be registered at eBay? There's a thought that it seems the registration of only one FIDO2 authenticator is allowed at the moment. Is that correct?
So let's talk different ways. So in terms of platform authenticators, currently you can register as many as you want. In terms of using roaming authenticators to be used for primary authentication, right now we restrict it to one per account, per site, basically, because again, they cannot be used across all the sites with different top-level domains.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
It does. And then just, not sure if you could share this. Well, actually, I'm not going to ask that one yet. I'll ask that one last. What is eBay's plan for disabling less secure authentication methods, like allowing your users to disable the password?
That's a great question. And to be honest, we are striving pretty hard towards that. But as you can see, that the legacy of the business and the wide user base, introducing one authentication mechanism is tough, but actually revoking anything from the site is even tougher. So our plan is to first get a consistent user experience, gain confidence, and have good amount of backup factors available before we actually pull the plug and give options to the users to remove passwords. So today we have a variety of options available on the website, and we are consistently monitoring as to the folks who have enrolled into WebAuthn, for example, how often they use passwords on their account or any other means as well. So there's a lot of data analysis happening as well. I cannot tell the exact timelines when we are going to do that, but that has been our aim from the day when we embarked ourselves on the WebAuthn journey.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I think this is kind of a follow-on question to that, because I think if you're going to allow your users to disable passwords, the account recovery has to be in a place where you're able to do that. So the question is, what is eBay looking at in terms of account recovery and like a feasible solution for passwordless? Is there anything you want to share about that?
So we are looking at it from multiple angles. There is no one size fits all because the user base itself is so diverse. So the FIDO spec suggests that the account recovery should have an equal and simple and secure FIDO compatible authenticator. But it makes more sense in the business community, but not towards the consumer community. So we are looking at evaluating all our options and seeing which ones come next best to FIDO, if not at the level of FIDO, and then see how many of such options we can provide to our users, catering to their user segments. So we are still really learning. We haven't decided on anything yet as to what would be the de facto account recovery, because to be honest, there cannot be just one de facto recovery. It has to have multiple options, just because our user base is such diverse that the single solution will not cater to everyone.
Okay, thank you. Can you share anything in terms of numbers for usage of FIDO for login by your consumer base?
Great question, and I would love to, but as you know, I am not authorized to share any actual numbers, but I can definitely say that it's being used by millions of customers worldwide right now actively. Apologies, but just comes as a disclaimer for working for a publicly traded company.
No, I think maybe we're expecting that would be the case.
Yeah, I apologize. I mean, if there is any particular nuance you would want to know more, maybe I can request you that we can take it offline and have a different conversation or a separate conversation, and maybe I would be able to share more details there.
Sure, thank you. Okay. Yes. Thank you. We have a question at the mic.
Hello,
Sure.
Dmitry Tiles from Deltec. So I wonder, do you see the need, or have there been given any thought to the idea of expanding the use of FIDO, not just for authentication, but also digitally signing transactions on eBay, just to ensure that the user actually explicitly confirmed that particular transaction?
That's a great point. And to a certain extent, we have certain flows, and also we are baking FIDO solutions into our step-up authentication flows so that the explicit user approval is captured and with the specs formal specification can be considered in terms of auditing explicit consent towards a transactional activity. So it comes as the nature of approval the user does. But apart from that, it's still in the thinking and the talks because there are other ways to achieve the same.
Thank you.
For example, we have push notification based two-step verification right now, right? There, the user's explicit consent to approve or deny a particular login transaction. Logging itself, you can consider it as a transaction, can be captured as an explicit user agreement given to allow a particular transaction, and we can take it from there. But it's just a matter of taking this and applying it to a step-up authentication flow for any transactional activities going forward.
Did that answer your question? He says yes. Thank you.